Welcome to In Touch with Officer Dawn and Ray the DA. Tune in to any Clear Channel radio station every Sunday to hear full episodes. Air times are listed at the end of this video. This Sunday, you will hear Ray expose some of Lexington's most prolific criminals, which he refers to as the Dirty 30. These are property crime offenders who commit crime after crime. During the month of October, 93% of crime committed in Lexington were property crimes, and we can contribute the majority of this statistic to a small percentage of criminals. You may be wondering, how are these offenders capable of committing so many crimes? Ray argues that this is due to the property crime offenders' low expectation of punishment. Listen now to hear more. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to In Touch Crime Beat. I'm Officer Don with Fayette Commonwealth's Attorney Ray Larson.
Out of jail, okay? Don't mess up. And those are the people, those repeat offenders, the ones that go to prison. And
I say we're the #1 rated radio show in the whole country. Hey, it's Officer Don with Commonwealth's Attorney Ray Larson. Welcome to the second part of In Touch. You're key to criminal justice news and views right here. Ray, what do you got this week? You got some mug shots in front of you. Who are those people? Fine-looking gentleman right there. Who's that one on the top?
Well, I'll get to that in just a minute.
Right.
One of the statistics that you, of course, love is the fact that in October, 93% of the crime in Lexington was what we call property crime. Now, so we got that figure, and when you realize this, that a small percentage of criminals commit the vast majority of these 93% of property crimes. And unfortunately, our legislature has come up with a law and a philosophy that property criminals probably shouldn't be sent to prison, shouldn't be put into custody in jail or prison. And as a result, they just turn these prolific hoodlums back onto the streets on what you call probation. Now, what we've decided to do is try to come up with a plan in our office to identify these prolific hoodlums and do everything we can to prosecute the small percentage of property criminals who commit the vast majority of this 93% of the crime that occurs in Lexington. And so what we've done, we call them frequent flyers because they're in the court system so often. And so we have been prosecuting these people, and what we have to do is cause the public to begin to pay attention to this. And so what we're doing is when one of these yard birds is arrested, then we quickly try to get the email addresses of all of the victims to let them know what's going on in this case. And the more attention that comes to this, the more we believe the higher the chances of these guys going to prison. Now, you said something about this, these mug shots that I have. The first one is Christopher Brown. He's 34 years old, and he was charged with felony theft, fraudulent use of a credit card, and being a persistent felony offender in the first degree. He was caught right out here at Lexington Green breaking into cars. People were in the movie, people in that gym over there, people shopping, that sort of thing. And so when he was caught, he told the police who interviewed him that he intended to do, this is what I do, break into cars. And I intend to do this until the day I die. So let's look at this guy. His criminal record is 33 prior felony convictions, mostly for this similar theft, breaking into cars related crime. He was placed on probation a number of times and he violated his probation, was brought back to court 4 times. He was sent to prison, but he was paroled in 2011. Now, he was given a 25-year sentence total for numbers of things. And he was sent to prison. In 2011, he was paroled. Within 4 months of the time he was out, he's arrested over here at Lexington Green. So, now, unfortunately, this guy he was sent to prison for 22 years, but he's eligible for parole after serving only 20%. Well, I can sit and bellyache about that, and I do. Mm-hmm. But what I'm very concerned about is at least getting this yard bird off the streets so that he can't be breaking into cars for as long as we can. And if he stays in for 4 years, that's 4 years of relief from Christopher Brown. Now, I got to give Judge Pam Goodwine some credit, and because she sent him to prison. Now, what's going to happen is, if she would have probated him again, I would be complaining about that, because that's what the judges are. Everything is anonymous when it comes to courts. You know that. You don't know what's going on in courts, really, unless you make an effort to find out. Well, you're no different than the rest of the public. Now, I got another mugshot, and this is Richard Darnell. He was charged with burglary in the 3rd degree. Now, burglary in the 3rd degree is breaking into a building, not a dwelling. A dwelling is where people live. A building is like a store or one of those outbuildings behind people have in the back of their house. And he admitted to a number of these kind of commercial burglaries. And he told the police that this burglary is, quote, his life's work. You seeing a similar message here? Yeah. And he only broke into stores because he could guarantee his eligibility for both probation and parole. See, he knows the 20% versus the 85%. You see? He knows the game. These guys are not stupid. And so he has 26 prior convictions, mostly for the burglary. He also has an escape. He has 3 parole violations. And he served out his latest prison term in April of 2010. Guess what? Arrested within 6 months for the same thing. Now, Judge Tom Clark, sent him to prison for 12 years. Now, good for Judge Clark. But the guy's eligible for parole after serving 20%. Mm-hmm. You see? So that's, 4 years? 2.5.
It's probably very unusual for the parole board to keep someone in prison for any crime other than what they consider to be violent.
Yeah.
And I say what they consider to be violent because certain crimes that you would think would be violent, like manslaughter, attempted murder, are not considered violent by the parole board based on their rules of whatever they
their
used
rules.
To.
Yeah.
So it's there are so many checks and balances in our process that keeps people out of prison. Really, our system is designed to keep people out. That's the reality of it. It starts on the street with a police officer because they have a lot of rules they have to follow before they can snatch somebody up and take them to jail. And once they do that, then that case is reviewed by the prosecutor before it's taken to the grand jury and a judge. And then it's taken to the grand jury, and the grand jury looks at it and reviews it and determines that there's probable cause. And then from there, it goes to trial. But somewhere between grand jury and trial, the defense really starts looking at it and trying to work something with the prosecutor to keep the person from going to prison. And then finally, if someone is that prolific or the crime is that hideous, they wind up going to trial. And then the jury looks at the trial, looks at the case, and the jury makes a determination if the person is guilty. And then sentencing, they also look at the sentencing phase where the jurors review the person's criminal history and blah, 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 blah. And then finally, the judge sends them to prison. But when he sends them to prison, then we know that the judge has the option of shock probating them. They have the option of just maybe not sending them to prison, give them probation. And then from there, parole board. And there's so many checks and balances. When somebody finally gets to prison, they deserve to be there, is the point. And let's forget the fact that they've had multiple chances before they even go to trial. I mean, how many first-time property crime offenders do you as a prosecutor actually take to trial? Probably not many. Most of them, you're going to work with them before the trial ever gets to that point, because you know that that's what's going to happen anyway.
You don't have to work with them because they know they're not going to be under our wimpy sentencing laws. They know that they're not going to go, and they're happy to plead guilty. Mm-hmm. See, the only thing that makes these bums work is something called the expectation of punishment. If they expect to be incarcerated, punished, that affects them. If they don't expect to be incarcerated, that affects them. You see, if they don't expect to be incarcerated, there's no real check on these people who are set up to commit crimes. That's the way they work. And at this point in our history, the expectation of going to prison for a property crime is, in my opinion, the lowest since I've been in the criminal justice system, which is 2,000 years. I'm telling you that's where we are, and people are hot.
Well, sure they are. I mean, when you have a police officer who catches someone breaking into a car, catches them in the act, and they knock on the person's door whose home this car was sitting in front of, and they say, "Ma'am, do you know this guy?" "No, I don't." "Well, we just caught him breaking into your car and stealing your stuff. We just wanted to make sure that you didn't know him, whatever. We're going to give him a ticket and send him on his way." That infuriates. And at first they blame it on the officer. And they go, "What do you mean you're going to give him a ticket? He was breaking into my car, and we've had 6 other cars in the neighborhood broken into. We had 12 the night before. Put the guy in jail." And the officer says, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but Kentucky law doesn't really allow for that. It allows for me to give him a ticket for this violation and send him on his way. And I agree with you. I'd like to put him in jail." But they changed the rules of engagement. So on the front end, we're dealing with that. Our police have to deal with that. And then when you finally do get a situation where the person's eligible for arrest, you have to deal with all the things that we just laid out for you. So it's a pretty complicated process. It's meant to be that way, I think, to keep people, sort of confused. As you said, there's so many cases, you really don't know you don't know who to blame. That's what you get into, because the police say, "Look, ma'am, it's not my fault. It's the justice system." And then who is the justice system? Is it the prosecutor? Is it the judge? Is it the legislature? Everyone gets to point fingers at everyone else or send it up the chain, and before it's over with, you just get worn out with it and go, "I don't know who to blame." I mean, that's.
Well, I do.
Well, yeah, of course. we know it starts with how these laws are written. That's where it starts, and then from there, you have to look at the rules that judges are handed down. Is who they're supposed to probate and who they should probate, and because they have their little meetings too about things that they can do to keep people out of jail. I mean, they do that. They meet about those things. As an associate, what do you mean? Things you can do to keep people out of jail. What good does that do anyone?
Well, first of all, we have 31 what we call frequent flyers that we're keeping up with, and I've just talked about 2. And when these
Tune into the following stations to hear the full episode.